Well, Max Verstappen on the pole for the sprint race in Austria tomorrow by the tiniest of margins, both Ferraris behind him in the order Charles Leclerc and Carlos Sainz. Really, really close qualifying. Q3 interrupted by 2 red flags, one brought out by Lewis Hamilton, the other by his teammate George Russell. Let's talk about those first of all, because they will for sure be getting the headlines. Not a good look when 2 of the best drivers in the world put their Formula One cars into the wall in more or less the same way. What is that telling us about the Mercedes? Well, what it tells me is that in order to get rid of the porpoising and to get the car into a drivable zone, obviously they're going to try to compromise as much as possible in terms of not losing any more downforce than they would need to. But the reality is both those spins looked as if they're running a higher rear ride height and they're just losing grip mid-corner. They're losing suction mid-corner as a result. And this just shows how difficult it is to get these 2022 ground effect cars actually to work. And I guess more than anything, it underlines the brilliant work by both Ferrari and Red Bull over the winter, because they've had to go nothing like the same growing pains as Mercedes. But to get back to the point, Lewis was really quick all day. He's quick in FP1 this morning, and he was very quick in qualifying initially. Q1, he was right up there. Q2, third behind Charles Leclerc and Max Verstappen. And all signs were that Lewis, and probably George as well, were going to be in there really fighting for a P2 or a P3. And Lewis's first run out of the pits in Q3 was a strange one, because he went purple in sector 1, looked pretty good on sector 2, and then back right out of the lap. And there was a bit of an argy-bargy with Charles Leclerc at this point about Lewis, when he should have let Charles past, and when he was then going to try and get a tow perhaps from Charles afterwards. It's kind of strange. And it was on that next lap that Lewis, going through the long left-hander, you go downhill right-hand, and then there's that long left-hander. He got the car in okay, mid-corner, the back end just went like that, and he just went straight off into the barrier. It's the first time. I mean, obviously Lewis has done things like that before, Friday practice usually. It's the first time I can remember him doing something like that in official qualifying for a long time. I'm not saying that he's probably never done it, but it was a very strange thing to see Lewis Hamilton unable to live with the car in that situation. And it can only speak to a complete lack of feel that the car is giving the driver, and therefore he's not feeling the surface of the road, which is what Lewis Hamilton is all about. So mid-corner, the back end came out, he put on the opposite lock, and the car just skated off into the outside barrier. Very strange and very unsettling, really, because this is a car, obviously, that they're playing around with ride heights to try to get rid of the porpoising, the vertical oscillation, as the FIA like to call it. And also, obviously, there is going to be some sort of limit brought in around the time of the Belgian Grand Prix, I think, in terms of vertical oscillation that the drivers can withstand. That is going to affect the ride heights. And suction into the corner, no suction mid-corner, that's what that looked like to me. Red flag, the session was red flagged, and at that point, Max Verstappen was slightly quicker than Charles Leclerc. Just looking down at the time, so Max had done a 5.0, Charles Leclerc a 5.1, Carlos Sainz a 5.3. Lewis, when he got out of the car, said, rather quaintly, I think is probably the right word, where's this put me on the grid? Well, at that point he was P8, but he inevitably dropped down to P10 because everybody else who hadn't done a run, of course, then went out and did it. So practice then restarted, and you thought this potentially is the moment for George Russell, because here's a 7 times world champion who's gone off putting his car on the absolute limit in a rather embarrassing way, not really feeling the car mid-corner and not feeling it at all mid-corner and going off into the barriers. And would George then take the weight of Mercedes on his shoulders and get into the top 3 perhaps? Well, he looked like he was on a pretty good lap. He was on the absolute George Russell limit of what is physically possible in a racing car. Slightly longer corners than Lewis, as I've always said, but made your eyes water really at the sort of turn-in points he had and how quickly he was getting back on the power. And it all looked reasonably good. Going into the last corner, however, there he is in the middle of the corner, and the same thing happened. Exactly the same thing as Lewis. Mid-corner, just lost the back end, just no chance to recover it, and went straight off into the barriers on the outside as well. So just to repeat it, 2 of the world's best Grand Prix drivers both crashed in a Mercedes Formula One car today, making it look like a really, really difficult car to drive. And it all comes back to the 2022 regs, the ground effect, and the combination marriage, if you like, between downforce and having the car running without bouncing or without porpoising. Really, really difficult compromise, obviously, at Mercedes. They appeared to be making really solid progress, but this will be a setback, because what this is basically saying is, yeah, we can get the car to run without bouncing, and we can get a pretty good lap out of it because we've got two very good drivers and it's quite good in a number of areas. But in terms of medium speed corners, when the grip is really picking up from the downforce, get any sort of angle on the car and the suction is just going to go, because of the ride heights are now running at the rear, much higher, of course, than Red Bull and Ferrari. And that's what we saw today. So, yeah, in the end, George Russell will be starting 5th, Lewis will be starting 10th. And it is the sprint race tomorrow, don't forget. So this, as we saw in Brazil last year with Lewis, there's still plenty of chance, plenty of opportunity for them to do something special come the Grand Prix on Sunday. The sprint race is tomorrow, Saturday. But after coming to Silverstone with a pretty good feel for momentum and where they're going, to a fairly straightforward circuit, let's face it, this will be, for Mercedes, what is going on. We need to be really careful about where we're going. And when you look at the performance of Alex Albon in the Williams, this is a car that they've drastically modified mid-season with longer pods, and it seems to be okay. Okay, he didn't get into Q3, but he's doing 6.2 and Pierre Gasly 6.1, so he's up there with the AlphaTauri. For Williams, not that bad, and obviously a bit of an improvement. So potentially now Mercedes might be saying, right, all bets off. We need to get these. We need to basically do what Red Bull are doing and what Ferrari are doing, and get rid of this incredibly difficult balance that we're living with between bouncing, downforce, and can the drivers actually feel what the car's doing or not? And I repeat it. If the suction suddenly goes from the rear, doesn't matter who it is, Lewis Hamilton, George Russell, they're not going to be able to do much to control it. Anyway, that left the field looking at one-lap runs, basically, going into the last minute and a half of Q3. And you would think at that point that Max with 5.0 and Charles at a 5.1, you'd think, are they going to be able to do that lap on that last run? Is it going to be some sort of traffic, things like that? Well, it was unbelievable, really, because both Ferraris at a 5.0, they both did laps that that were good enough to put them on the pole if Max then hadn't gone even quicker. But he did. He did a 4.9. Really, really good lap by Max. Under pressure, 4.9, 5.0 Charles Leclerc, 5.0 Carlos Sainz. And the track was a little bit cooler. The temperature dropped about 3 degrees for track temperature as well. So it was quite a difficult one in terms of how and where to warm up the tyres. And interestingly, Max wasn't that good in Sector 1 on that 4.9 lap. But he still got the pole for the sprint race tomorrow. I have to keep saying that because it's quite easy to forget that it is a sprint race. We've got lulled into non-sprint races. Personally, I'm still not a fan. I don't know. Maybe I'll change my mind after tomorrow. But to me, I just like qualifying to be qualifying and the Grand Prix to be the Grand Prix. Other results, Sergio Perez, a bit disappointing really. He didn't get the car, wasn't happy with the balance of the car at all this morning, and got on the radio at one point and said, look, we're obviously going the wrong way with everything. Let's come in and decamp, reboot and go back out again. He eventually did a 5.4, which is, half a second slower than Max. It's quite a lot around Austria. But, that's the sprint race. He's starting P4, could get a podium in the sprint race and could go really well on Sunday. So not a bad result for Sergio Perez and for Red Bull. It's really good, of course, 1st and 4th. George Russell will start 5th. Looked to be sort of rear wing damage to the car. Not that bad. He went in backwards. Gearbox, we'll have to wait and see if there's something happening with the gearbox. More importantly, perhaps, he might get a rap on the knuckles. Not quite sure what it'll be for when he got out of the car under the red flag period. He just walked across the track into the pit lane, which of course you're not supposed to do anymore. You've got to wait for a marshal to take you around in a car or whatever it is. So there'll be that to go through from George's point of view. Esteban Ocon, whose praises I was singing at Silverstone, well, I don't know if you heard them. I was singing his praises actually on Twitch on the live stream, and how he was one of the really surprisingly good drivers through the infield section at Silverstone where I was watching at the British Grand Prix. He and Mick Schumacher actually were just brilliant, I thought. And continuing to do that. 5.7 for Esteban. George did 5.4. Esteban 5.7. Kevin Magnussen, both Haas's in the top 10, back to where we kind of started the year. Mick Schumacher at one point was quickest in Q1. Yeah, okay, he was out of sync with when the others were going in for tyres, but drove really well. So Kevin did a 5.8, Mick a 6.0, which is where you would want him to be, 0.2 around of Kevin Magnussen, who's a really quick racing driver, as I've always been saying. So another excellent performance from Mick Schumacher. Fernando Alonso hadn't done a time when Lewis went off in Q3, quite sure what was going on there, but went out and did a 6.1, probably under the heading of get a banker lap in because we had a few dramas with the car. So he will start 9th, and then Lewis Hamilton 10th. As for some of the other results of qualifying, Daniel Ricciardo didn't make it out of Q1, whereas Lando Norris was 8th in Q1. He did a 6.3, Daniel Ricciardo 6.6, 3/10 around Austria. Assuming there are no justifiable excuses for that, that is a big margin for Daniel Ricciardo. Neither Aston Martin got out of Q1, need I say more. And Guanyu Zhou, who looked as if he was suffering a little bit from everything that happened at Silverstone, didn't get out of Q1 either. Did a 6.9, whereas Valtteri did a 6.4, so half a second off the pace. Kind of what you would expect from all of that. Very, very close throughout. I mean, in Q1, Alonso, Hamilton both did 6.0s. There were 5 drivers doing 6.4s. Yeah, it was typical of Austria, very, very close laps. Anyway, let's have a look at Q2. Neither AlphaTauri got out of Q2. Pierre Gasly was a little bit quicker than Yuki Tsunoda. Well, a lot quicker actually, 0.7. There was a moment when Tsunoda had a massive oversteer slide going through turn 1 and got on the radio and said, "Oversteer!" as if he was very angry with this oversteer. What's it doing, attacking him like that? And I remember thinking, well, you know, shorter corners, a little bit more sympathy on the brake pedal, steering input, maybe you won't have the same amount of oversteer. But I kind of take that back now, because what we then saw with the two Mercs possibly explains what is going on at AlphaTauri as well, which is we got quite a lot of bouncing, need to raise the ride heights, and as a result we're getting mid-corner oversteer as well. So I take that back, Yuki. Probably you're right to be moaning about the oversteer. Alex Albon didn't get out of Q2, but was, as I say, he was kind of there or thereabouts, kind of on the just off the Haas pace. And around Austria this weekend, that's not a bad place to be. And Lando Norris just seemed to have some incredible brake drama and just never seemed comfortable with the car. I mean, he was a lot quicker than Daniel, as we saw, but he was just all over the place in terms of turn-in points and I mean, at one point he said, "I just don't know when to brake, and I've got no confidence in the brakes whatsoever." So I'm afraid I can't say any more than that at the moment. Whether that's a ground effect issue or whether that was a specific brake issue, we'll have to wait and see and watch this space. Charles Leclerc was always quick throughout qualifying, as was Max. Lewis, as I say, very quick early on. But I think in looking forward, not only to the sprint race, but to the Grand Prix on Sunday, let's have a look back at FP3 this morning when they all ran, obviously, around Austria for the first time. And the only driver who put in any sort of long run on the soft tyre was Max Verstappen. And that's because when he went out straight away in the early runs on soft tyres, he was blitzing everybody. Just compare it. Charles Leclerc, 8.3, 8P0 at FP1 this morning, and you thought, wow, you know, sort of baseline time there. Max stayed in the garage for a while, and then his opening laps were 7.7, 7.7, 7.4, and that's how that session ended, 0.6 quicker than the two Ferraris. And as a result of that, Max then got on with full tank running, and you can see there what he did on soft tyres, but you can see a pretty good run there, whereas everybody else went out for a second run on soft tyres, and that's why they got to be pretty quick towards the end. But Max is out there droning around doing his fuel tank runs as early as FP1, so you can see that. Look at the consistency: 11.1, 11.0, 11.4, 11.1, 10.8, 11.0, 11.1. Pretty impressive, and that is knowing that there's going to be qualifying in the afternoon for the sprint race, and the others are running 2, maybe 3 sets of soft tyres just to really get into the lap. And there's Max doing that long run on Friday morning. I think that said a million words, to be honest, about how he feels in the car and the confidence the car is giving him. Obviously things will change, and again Red Bull probably will do a run tomorrow on another long run in FP2, I guess it is now, isn't it, on Saturday morning, and the Ferraris no doubt will have to, because they haven't done any long runs at all. All they did this morning was prepare for qualifying to get the best possible lap time out of the car. So in that respect, it's no real surprise to see how close the Ferraris are to the Red Bull around the A1 ring, because they have spent a lot of time getting the laps together, whereas Max appears to be the normal thing for Red Bull these days. Get the car more or less balanced, and then let's just get fuel in the car. Because this race, again, is going to be about time management, and if it's a one-stop strategy, it's going to be about elongating that first stint. So a lot of really good work by Red Bull and Max this morning. Valtteri Bottas starting from the back of the grid due to numerous engine and turbo changes, all that stuff. Plus he got a €1,000 fine for speeding in the pit lane, so not a great day for Valtteri. And a graphic showed at the end of FP1 that, surprise, surprise, Max Verstappen is braking earlier than Charles Leclerc into turn 1. And they said from 317 kilometers an hour. That seems to be very fast for the pit straight there. Anyway, that's what the graphic said. He seemed to be braking about 10 meters earlier than Charles into turn 1. Again, no real surprise. And if you haven't seen the video on this channel about why Max is so quick, even though he brakes relatively early, then have a look at it, because it's all about, in Max's case, it's all about the platform, and it's all about the rotation point, and it's all about keeping everything as supple and as graceful. Is that a word that Rob? No, elegant as possible. There we go. The only other thing just to show you is the average top speeds. I say average, you know, just taking a few random top speeds from various cars in FP1 this morning, which was, you know, it doesn't matter what the track conditions like. If it's all at the same time, it's pretty representative. And there you can see, okay, the Williams still a mega quick car, 315, so it doesn't have a lot of downforce, but maybe it's going to be a really good drivable race car as a result. Max did 314 average on light fuel, 289 with heavy fuel. I've got no other heavy fuel times there because nobody else ran heavy fuel. I think a couple of them did, but not the same fuel load as Max. And that was obviously, you know, a seriously good run for him. And then look at this. Look how quick the Mercedes are now compared with, say, Sergio Perez. Perez 313, Hamilton 3112, Russell 3112. Alonso used to be super quick in a straight line as well, in the Alpine 3112. So what we're saying is the Mercedes has taken sufficient amount of downforce out of the car by raising ride heights and maybe blockage a little bit in the diffuser area to be really quick in a straight line now. But they've traded that, of course, for this incredibly sudden breakaway that we saw with both drivers, and that's to do with the higher ride height they're now running. Now, if you were to be able to go backwards in time and rewind those two shunts and lower the rear ride height, probably they wouldn't have gone off. They probably would have had a lot of bouncing in the straight leading up to that, but they probably wouldn't have gone off. So that's where Mercedes are, and it'll be interesting. I mean, they'll probably be thinking now, well, we'll run with those ride heights because in the race it's a different situation anyway. Everybody's on heavy fuel and things will happen and safety cars, blah, blah, blah. So we'll just get away with it. But it'll be interesting to see what they do going forward. Just a reminder that this is a double header, of course, coming on the back end of Silverstone. Actually, for some, it's a triple header. For Red Bull, Alpine, McLaren and Williams, they're all staying on in Austria in tyre testing the following week. Kind of a shame Mercedes are not doing that. I would have thought they would like to be doing that, but they're not. In this case, those are the nominated teams. So there we are. Pleased to say that both Merc drivers seem to be fine, and that's a very good thing, of course. It was slightly weird when the red just came out, and it was pretty clear it was Lewis, and everybody sort of looked at one another. But that moment passed quickly when he got out of the car. Heavy breathing, you know, really just saying how sorry he was that he damaged the car. But I don't think, to be honest with you, I don't think he needs to apologise, because for me, if Mercedes are building a car now that neither Lewis nor George can keep on the track, mid high-speed corner, medium high-speed corner, then I blame the car for that. I don't blame those two drivers, because all those guys were doing was putting the car on the absolute limit, as they would. So there we are. Good day again. Frederik Vesti was really good in Formula 3 in Austria a few years ago. Now he's on the pole, his first pole in Formula 2, so it'll be good to see how he goes. He's a Mercedes contracted driver, of course. So looking forward to the F2 race, F3 race as well, and of course the sprint race. We'll see you tomorrow for that. Thanks for watching. Take care.